Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to see how to create a Docker image for Python application and how to run the Docker image as a Docker container. So let's get started. So this is the Python code that we have written using Flask framework in the earlier videos. If you have missed watching that video, please watch that video. I'll mention that video link in the description section. So let me tell you on a high level. So here we are importing the Flask package. And here we are creating the instance of Flask. And then we are writing a simple endpoint using the route decorator. And here we are running our application. So 8000 is a port on which our application will be up and running. And in the requirements.txt file, since we require only the Flask package for running our application, I'm mentioning the package name as Flask. So this is the application code that we have. So in order to create any Docker image, first we need to write a Docker file. Using this Docker file, we'll be creating a Docker image. And this Docker file will consist of a set of instructions for creating a Docker image. So let's create a Docker file in the same path where our application code exists. Right? And the first line or the first instruction in any Docker file is from. So using this from keyword, we'll specify the base image that we are going to use for creating a custom. Since we are going to create a Docker image for our Python application, we are going to use the base image as Python colon, and the required version is 3.8 hyphen. And now we are going to see all the images that we have. So these are all the base images that we have. You can use any of these base image, but let me go with Alpine. So this is the base image that we are going to use for creating our Docker image for Python application. Let's assume if you want to create a Docker image for Java application, then you are going to use Java base image instead of the Python. So based on for which application you want to create a Docker image, you will be using that respective base image. So the next instruction that we are going to use is working directory. And we specify the working directory path as /app. The reason why we are specifying the working directory as, let's say if you run any commands in this Docker file, for example, run, add, copy, right? So all these commands will be executed inside this working directory. So that's the reason we are specifying the working directory. You can specify any working directory here, but I'm going with /app. And the next command that we are going to use is copy. So we need to copy our application code from our local machine to the Docker image. So that's the reason we are using copy command here. So the source that I'm specifying here is dot. Here we have to specify the path where our application code exists. So since our application code exists in the same directory where our Docker file is present, so I'm specifying that as dot. And the destination directory path is also dot, because this command will be executed inside this /app directory. So all our application code will be copied into this /app folder. And once all our application code is copied into the Docker image, the next thing that we have to use is to install the dependencies required for our application. So in our case, we have to install Flask package. So for that one, we'll be using run command. Using this run command, we specify any command that needs to be run inside the Docker image. So in order to install any packages in Python, we will be using Python package manager called pip. So pip install, and we'll be specifying the requirements.txt file. So since we have mentioned the Flask package inside this requirements.txt file. This PP is going to install the Flask package in this Docker image. So once the dependencies are installed in the Docker image, we will be using expose command in order to expose the port on which our application is running. So in our case, as we saw earlier, our application will be up and running on the port 8000. So we'll be exposing 8000 so that the Docker container will be listening on port 8000 for any incoming request. And the final command that we are going to use is entry point. So we'll be using this entry point in order to run our application. So the command for running our application is python 3 app.py. So this is the name of the file that we have, app.py, and we are using python 3 for running our application. So let's save this Docker file. Now we have created a Docker file for creating a Docker image. So for creating a Docker image, we'll be using few Docker commands. For that, make sure you have Docker Desktop installed on your Windows machine. So in my case, Docker Desktop is installed and it is in running state. So once you install the Docker Desktop and it is in running state, we can run Docker commands for creating the Docker image. So for that one, let me open the terminal here and let me open the Git bash. So for creating a Docker image, the command that we are going to use is docker build. Docker build, and then we have to specify the name of the image that we want using -t flag. And let's say we want to give the name of our Docker image as python-web API colon, and the tag is 1.0. And then we have to specify the path in which our Docker file present. So let me give that as a dot since our Docker file is exist on the Flask app folder itself. So let me hit enter. So this will build a Docker image for us. So you can see all the instructions are executing. This is the first instruction, and this is the second one. This is the third one, and this is the fourth instruction that we have written in our Docker file. Now our Docker image is created. For checking whether the Docker image is successfully created or not, we'll be using Docker images command. If you enter Docker images, you will see the Docker image that is created with the tag 1.0. So in order to run this Docker image as a Docker container, we'll be using Docker run command. Docker run, and we'll be running the Docker container as a detached mode, and we'll specify the port on which it has to be exposed on our machine. So we'll be using 8000 colon 8000. So this is the port on which, so this 8000 is a port on which our container will be running, and this is the port on which we can access from our local machine. And then we have to specify the Docker image name that we have created. So let me give this as a python-web API colon 1.0. If you click on enter, this will create a Docker container using this Docker image. So in order to access the application running inside this Docker container, we will be using a local host on port 8000. So let's navigate to the browser and let's use the localhost colon 8000 on which our application is running. So if we click on enter, you can see we are getting a response from our application. So this is the endpoint that we have created in our application. So whenever we hit the root endpoint, we will get this message. So in this way, we'll be creating a Docker image and we'll be creating a Docker container for our application. So till now, we have seen how to create a Docker image and how to run the Docker image as a Docker container in our local machine. In the next video, we are going to see how to host this Docker container in the container instances in Azure and how to access the instance that we have created in Azure. So if you like this video, please hit like button and subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss out on my next videos. Thank you.